recording for those who aren't able to join us live. We'll be sharing a recording of the webinar with everybody who's registered after the fact. If you'd like to pose a question, please use the Q&A function or the chat function, and we will be getting all of your questions to the moderator, Ellen Dorsey. We can't promise that we'll get to all of them, but we'll do our absolute best. And the final thing that I'm going to do now is to launch a poll, which we'll have live during the course of the call, just to get some very high-level information from you about how the COVID-19 pandemic has been affecting your work on energy access. So I'm now going to pass the baton over to the first of our remarkable community of women leaders in energy access and my partner at the Shine campaign, Amira Woods.
Greetings, everyone.
There's another one here.
Welcome.
Amira, you need to unmute yourself.
Greetings, everyone. What a joy to have you all here. Thank you so much for carving out time to participate with us in this launch of the Shine COVID Recovery Fund. It is my enormous pleasure to introduce someone who probably needs no introduction, Rachel Kite. Rachel is, we think of her as our matriarch, one of the co-founders of Shine. She is also Dean of the Fletcher School of Diplomacy in Boston, and we also know her well from her role as the Chief Executive of Sustainable Energy for All and Special Representative for the UN for Sustainable Energy for All. Her titles are long and many. She was before then at the World Bank as a Vice President on Sustainable Development and Climate Issues. She knows her stuff, and we are so grateful she's going to be here to lend her voice to this conversation today and to the launch of Shine's COVID Recovery Fund. Rachel, it is such an honor to have you here. Thank you for all that you do and all that you represent.
Well, thank you, Amira, and really the honor is mine because today on this call, we have some of the women who've inspired me through my career, and if I can do anything at all to help them continue what they're doing at such a critical time, then you can always call on me. But also for the rest of you who are joining the call, and I'm watching the numbers ticking up as we're talking, this is an important moment. We as a global community are passing some really horrific benchmarks in terms of the impact of the COVID crisis. It has affected everybody in the world, either directly or indirectly. And we tend to think of those who have the least, those who find themselves at what is often described the last mile, as the most vulnerable. Well, it's true that the brittleness of the systems of energy and finance and economics and health and food, the brittleness that has been revealed by the COVID crisis, does exacerbate the vulnerability of those who are at the bottom of the ladder in economic terms. But it is also in their truth and in their communities and in the kinds of organizations and efforts and initiatives that we're here to talk about and support today that we find real resilience. And what COVID has done is thrown us all back onto our heels and really to think about what does resilience mean in a world where you can't self-isolate, you cannot cut yourself off. And in fact, for those of us who've been working on energy access for so long, it has always been about taking the last mile and making them first. Because if we can deal with resilience and if we can build and empower those communities to be able to take care of themselves, we will, by definition, therefore, also make the rest of our society stronger. So COVID has basically pulled a Band-Aid, pulled a sticking plaster off the lack of inclusion, the inequality, and the lack of fairness in our energy systems that we've known about. And so why are we gathered here today? We're gathered here today because the Shine campaign, which I'm so proud to be part of, The Shine campaign, which was born of a vision that we could help people who want to be part of a solution find ways to connect directly to those who need energy in order to be productive within their own communities and their economies. That at this point, the Shine campaign can actually find a way to support in recovery energy access. There are amazing organizations, amazing businesses, social businesses, often and most often led by women around the world who are, even in the teeth of the COVID crisis, providing access to energy to the most vulnerable. And at this point in the crisis, we have to find ways to sustain them and to help them be a part of the recovery process. So I'm here to lend my voice and lend my support to the extraordinary work of so many that you're going to hear from today, and just ask you that we know that you can't have sustainable healthcare systems without energy. You can't have sustainable and robust food value chains and food systems without energy, that this recovery is dependent upon us finally putting the last mile first. And if COVID has taught us anything, it is that at the local level, we can build strength, which will give us the kind of global solutions that we talk about at the UN General Assembly this week. So I hope that this recovery fund will be of use. The women that it will support are certainly of use on a daily basis. And it is my humble honor to be with you today. Thank you.
I think Shine's vision for the grant has definitely been much more than just the money. It's been about the principles.
Well, first of all, I think they've shown and taking a bold step in doing this in the terms of like focusing on local, indigenous, women-led. I've never seen a grant like this within the sector. So first of all, like kudos to them for the bold step. And I think it's something that everyone understands. There's a big need for it, but them taking that step to say we can change, we want to try and make a difference. It's really, really important.
One of the things that we've seen since COVID and also generally in the sector of energy access or climate change is that many times the underdogs, the frontliners, the hard, last mile, deep poverty lens entrepreneurs and workers kind of get sidelined when it comes to getting access to solutions, a platform, and an opportunity to really be able to make a difference in a way that's significant.
By providing women with an economic opportunity to distribute clean energy products in their communities across Africa.
And the grant is essentially then really wanting to give a platform to those people that are addressing both climate, COVID, and poverty. And I think so beyond money, we will get an opportunity to really start shifting the dialogue and focusing on climate change justice and equality, and also really shining those true frontliner rock stars that need to be showcased when we're having this larger conversation, because they don't end up getting an opportunity to be a part of it.
Greetings, everyone. Hi, I'm Ellen Dorsey. I'm the Executive Director of the Wallace Global Fund, and I'm really pleased to welcome you to this call today. And I'm actually so excited about what you're about to hear. We all know, as Rachel said, that the COVID-19 pandemic has given rise to one of the most challenging global health and economic crises in history. And it's occurring in the midst of an accelerating climate emergency. COVID has exposed flawed systems that we know have been failing marginalized communities for years, with almost every country around the world projected to enter into a recession this year. Vulnerable populations will be at an even greater risk of facing extreme poverty, reversing decades of progress and rendering the SDGs even more challenging to realize. However, this pivotal moment also presents an opportunity to address economic inequality with a climate and equity lens while making clean energy a central part of the COVID recovery. To address both climate and the economic crises facing us today, it is critical that we transition to a global economy that ensures all will benefit, a global energy economy. It would also be another system failure if governments of the world prioritized large-scale renewables and did not reach the approximately 1 billion people without access to clean, reliable, affordable energy today. Yet with dedicated focus, targeted funds, and supporting communities, we don't need to replicate the failures of the past. Women, Indigenous, and grassroots communities are on the front lines of the COVID crisis and the climate crisis. They are uniquely positioned to be both beneficiaries and agents of change. Across the world, from boardrooms to local communities, women are taking the lead on climate change and demanding that they be integral players in the decision-making process. And that is what we will discuss today. The context in which COVID hit, and then the needs that it presents to the energy access space. We will discuss a new emergency COVID fund that will get resources to where it is needed most and ensure that progress on reaching the last mile with clean energy is not disrupted. The SHINE campaign is presenting innovative partnerships to pilot breakthrough solutions to scale distributed renewable energy and empower communities worldwide. The SHINE COVID Recovery Fund grants will ensure frontline entrepreneurs, cooperatives, agencies, and community leaders have the resources necessary to defend vulnerable or marginalized populations struggling in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, and including this initial outbreak and the anticipated second wave of infections and related economic disruptions. I'm thrilled to present a panel of leaders, experts, and quite frankly, some of the most dynamic women I have had the pleasure of working with, who have come together to design this COVID Energy Access Fund. I've had the pleasure of joining many of these calls and been consistently blown away with the intelligence, integrity, and creativity of the women I will now introduce. First, I'd like to introduce Sheila Oparacha, who's from Energia. She has 21 years of working experience in the gender and energy sector, a bachelor's degree in veterinary medicine, and a master's degree in gender and development planning. She's the international coordinator and program manager of Energia, the international network on gender and sustainable energy. We will also hear from Mariama Kamara from Smiling Through Light. She's the founder and director of Smiling Through Light, which provides clean, reliable, and sustainable energy in Sierra Leone through the distribution and sales of solar products focusing on the last mile. And finally, Jada Shaw from Frontier Markets. She drives vision, strategy, investments, and partnerships at Frontier Markets. She has been working in social enterprises in rural India, in microfinance, rural distribution, marketing, and access for 15 plus years, and is committed to empowering rural women across the developing world through business models, clean energy, technology, data, and inspiring women to push themselves beyond their societal boundaries. We're going to move to me asking some preliminary questions of our three incredible panelists, and then we'll open it up for your questions, which you can begin putting into the chat function. First, let's begin with Sheila. Sheila, What are some of the disproportionate impacts of COVID-19 that are currently affecting women, Indigenous communities, and local entrepreneurs in the last mile communities?
Ellen, thank you very much for the question. Let me just say up front, I think I'm having some connection problems, so I might switch off my camera. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay,
And it's
okay, so just give me a sign if you can't. And then I'll do that. Okay, so Ellen, before I go into what the disproportionate impacts are, I want to say up front that we've all seen from the media how women's leadership has been central to the effective management of COVID-19 crisis and inclusive recoveries. From the highest level of decision making, such as the Prime Minister from New Zealand, the first country to be COVID-free, to the fact that women are making up 70% of the frontline workers in the health and social sector. So women are leading the recovery. However, in spite of that, we do find that they are disproportionately impacted. First of all, let me talk about businesses, particularly from developing countries where I work. We find that women-led businesses are mostly in the informal sector. They make up 80% of the businesses in the informal sector, and they're much more vulnerable and much more difficult to reach. However, many of these women entrepreneurs, they are household breadwinners. Their income support essentials like education, health, and housing. And they're also, as Rachel said, and you said earlier, they're also very essential to last mile distribution of renewable energy technologies because of their unique ability to connect to their customers in last mile communities. We did our own assessment of the 6,000 women entrepreneurs that we work with in Kenya, Nigeria, Senegal, and Tanzania. And what we found astounded us. None of the women entrepreneurs that we had, I'm talking about 6,000 women entrepreneurs, had heard of any relief packages for businesses in their countries, in all those countries that we work with. So in this regard, the female entrepreneurs really need financial support and debt restructuring to salvage their operations. And this is why we really welcome the SHINE COVID recovery package and fund. But they also need access to mobile and digital technologies, including for e-banking and digital financial services to build their future successes in the remote way of working that we're currently using. Second, we have found that energy access and end-use appliances need to be assured as part of the rethinking of the care economy and the new importance of the home at the center of work, care, and leisure. Already, UN Women is telling us that before COVID-19, women were doing 3 times more of unpaid work and domestic work than men. And now, with social distancing, homeschooling, caring for people at homes, more cooking at homes, with the hygiene and the cleaning, that the unpaid care for women has really increased. And as particularly we find in poor and rural communities, this really has an impact on women's time poverty and the drudgery. So we really do need to ensure that to improve women's access to electrical appliances via, for example, flexible payment systems, pay-as-you-go measures, targeted subsidies, and eliminating utility cutoffs. Third, most importantly in the energy sector is really clean cooking fuels and technologies. This is particularly important because household air pollution from traditional biomass cooking already causes 4 billion premature deaths of women, particularly of women and children in developing countries. And this increases their susceptibility to respiratory infections, which could lead to higher mortality for women under COVID-19. And therefore, it's imperative that our governments make clean cooking and affordable solutions as part of the pandemic emergency response plans. Fourth, we're beginning to see that gender-based violence has increased during the lockdown. We also find that in health clinics in the continent that I come from, only 28% of health clinics are powered. And this also has an impact on female mortality. So we really do need to have better lighting in homes and public spaces for security, but also to increase access to of electricity to communication tools such as solar radios and mobile phone chargers that allow women to stay informed. Last but most importantly, women need to have a place at the table in energy transition and post COVID-19 economy recovery decision making and planning. Our research within Energia has shown that gender-blind policies are not going to achieve the universal development goals that we aim to achieve by 2030, particularly SDG 7 on energy. Women's experiences and voices are needed in planning and implementation. We need gender assessments, integrated planning, sex disaggregated data for meaningful planning, but also for holding ourselves accountable. Funding and investments are critical in this area. So let me just conclude in saying, as we move forward, we're urging all of us to really integrate women to make more equitable access to and control over sustainable energy services as an essential right to both women's and men's development. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheila, for that, quite frankly, very comprehensive and succinct overview of the impact of COVID on women and women in the energy access field. I just want to note to folks, some that have come on later, that we're taking questions for the panelists in our chat function, and you'll have plenty of opportunity to raise them, and we'll try and cover them all. Let me next turn to Mariama. And Mariama, share with us the difference between the work of community groups or small to medium-sized entrepreneurs with the more dominant models, i.e. those characterized by expats, men, Western-led, also often typically larger, and the mega players, those with the access to capital, the investors, et cetera. Why is this smaller, women-led sector much more at risk from COVID?
Thank you so much, Helen. And I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you so much to the Shine campaign and all the women leaders on this council for such an important initiative, which is going to change millions of lives. With your question, let's put in context. So on the continent, there's 565 million people without access to electricity. That's a lot of people. We're also seeing over $25 billion of finance going into universal access for clean energy. But what we as local entrepreneurs, SME are facing and asking daily is, where is all these billions going? Who is getting all the funding? Because a lot of the SMEs are struggling. Last week, I had an opportunity to read an article by The Guardian, and these were some of the highlights. That quote, I quote, "Silicon Valley has deep pockets for African startups if you're not African." So this is a big challenge. And one thing I would like to say and applaud is that we're now at a space that we can actually recognize that we have a systematic problem. There's a lot of inequalities and there's not much inclusion. So that's a good thing to recognize, that we have a space now where we can openly sit and discuss it, because it's everything that everyone knows about. What key differences are you seeing? We're seeing entrepreneurs who have spent on the continent doing a lot of advocacy work, policy work, lobbying their government, creating an enabling ecosystem for them to do all the work. And when it's time to implement and get the work done, the finance is not available to them. We see a lot of SMEs fighting for $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 grants when all the bigger Western players are getting over millions. We see expats that come on the continent who probably just finished university, or they were on a tour, or they discovered an issue, and within time they set up a startup and the finance is readily available. So this is something which is not new. It's not this elephant in the big room. I think we all understand that this is a key issue. For me, we just want to see a difference. We know it's a competitive market. Local entrepreneurs want to play and be within the market. We want to support, we want to do all the activities. If you look at the current finance, all we keep hearing on a daily basis is that we don't have traction. How can you build traction when you don't have the finance to support it? You have to start somewhere to build. You have to start somewhere to scale. You have to start somewhere to get all your products in. So for us, it's always the same thing of the resilience, working, doing the policy work. I see all the time, all we see for SMEs, especially on the continent, is capacity building, is technical assistance, and we need to do much more than that. I always say with the finance comes technical assistance. You can't say to us, we don't know how to do financial planning, your financial accountant on point. These are all the narratives that's been created. And when you sit and see that, it's really just quite disheartening to say, for example, myself, I've been working in the sector since 2011, and to date, we've only been able to raise around $50,000, and that's through an African-led fund. So the sector definitely needs to change. We definitely need to deal with these inequalities. A lot of the organizations that's working on the continent are not readily available to partner with local organizations. And that's something which we also need to deal with. So I would conclude by saying that yes, we have a big issue, but also for me, I want to call out the people like the African Development Bank, because finance is coming from the West, particularly the US, the UK, and the money are going much more to their own organization. African leaders on the continent, African entrepreneurs or business people who have money need to start investing in local businesses. They also have a key role to play, and I think they need to take that leadership to strengthen all the hard work of entrepreneurs on the continent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariama, and thank you for that shout out at the end, the call to action. Before I go to Jade, I'm going to go back to Sheila and ask you to expand a bit. You already spoke about why access to clean distributed energy is so vital for COVID recovery, but maybe take that a little bit further and also speak to what you are seeing in terms of locally rooted clean energy champions, what they're doing to respond to the COVID pandemic in their communities.
Thank you very much, Ellen. Hello, Ellen, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you, Sheila. Now we can't.
Sheila, can you unmute yourself?
We all know how complicated these Zoom webinars are, despite the fact we've all been on a million of them.
Ellen, maybe go to Ajada for now and we can come back to Sheila.
Good idea. Thanks, Fletcher. Ajada, we're coming to you. What are some strategies that entrepreneurs, agencies, philanthropies, and investors are implementing right now in India to mitigate the harmful economic impacts of COVID-19 on last mile communities? And maybe you could also tackle a second question. How will this new Shine Fund support recovery in these communities and help?
Yeah, thanks for that, Ellen. And also good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. It's evening on my side, but it's really, really great to see such an amazing turnout. I think the count is now 84, so like very exciting. To answer the question, let me maybe take a step back and just give what is the reality in India right now, and what have we faced really because of COVID. And the reality is that we have almost 1.3 billion people in the country, and now almost 900 million people have suffered because of COVID harsh realities. Loss of income, massive migration, increase in rural health vulnerabilities, supply chain breaks, loss of funding, and sustainable income. And just in the last 6 months, we've also been hit by insane to locusts, right? So there's been a lot going on when it comes to the India context in itself. And I think it's always important to recognize that even some of the more well-established countries per se have a massive group of people that are in a vulnerable position. So what people really have needed is money to access essential goods, deal with health crises. They needed jobs to restart. They needed capital to retain infra, people, and systems. And specifically for rural communities and their biggest support, which for us has been NGOs and grassroots communities, they've had to shut down or streamline their community-based livelihood work because of social distancing, as well as been able to shut down a lot of their operations because of lack of sustainable funding. And social enterprises that focus on last mile access have had to streamline their work due to lack of sustainable capital, uncertainty of supply chains for access of goods, and also lack of funding because markets have been in turmoil. So, it's a really cyclical, top to bottom down reality check that we have to all recognize because of COVID and climate, and then recognize countries like India then suffer in a massive way because of our population. So to address this, the ecosystem has really focused on innovation, digitization, partnerships, and blended financing. So under innovation, people have really been shifting from nice to have products to must to have. Companies and organizations have been innovating for the need of the hour, from digital health check solutions to solar off-grid health kits to creating new job opportunities for people in teleservices. We've seen very strong partnerships happening. Organizations are partnering with each other to create shared value. If someone's a product manufacturer, they're partnering with access organizations to bridge the supply chain gap. Someone's in digital technology solution, they're partnering with NGOs to help onboard my people onto a digital platform. And capital, CSR funding, donor capital is now collaborating with debt and equity. So where government is maybe funding to address some of those small rural income gaps for essential services, donors are funding pilots for partnerships of new ideas to try to create a new normal in this post-COVID world. And CSR funding has been playing a role to fund capacity gaps to help people, especially women, catch up on this digital catch-up that now needs to happen in this post-COVID world. But let's be fair. This is going to, and I think I love what Mariama said, it's going to well-established organizations that can access these funds easily, right? They can create business plans, they can go to their alma maters, and they can really get that money fast because they probably already had that money and they just had to re-tap those resources. Where this funding comes in is that it reaches directly to the families directly. It reaches to the women who are sitting and actually dealing with the suffering directly. It's going to those women who need that funding that will invest in their innovation locally, to build their capacity locally, to fill the vulnerability gaps locally. This grant will allow not people like me, but people like my Sahelis, these rural women entrepreneurs who were married at 14 and now at 35 have 5 kids at a low level literacy to gain access to funding voice at the time of COVID. And I think that's really the most powerful element that we see that comes into the shift of this grant versus all the innovations that have been happening in India, which are crucial and exciting, but somewhere or the other, the gap needs to be bridged.
Hi, Jada, thank you so much. And I'm gonna turn to a last question to Mariama. Mariama, what inspired you to play a role in creating this Shine COVID Recovery Fund? And tell us a little bit about how you see it working.
Okay. I think what really inspired me as a young woman is just to be surrounded by such positive leaders within the sector. Women that I've been working with for years through the SE for All People-Centered Accelerator, which was another space that gave women a voice, and not only a voice of us appearing at conferences, of us being on blog posts, of us being on posters, but us being there to say these are the challenges that we're currently experiencing. So when this opportunity came up, I was just so inspired because I always think, even myself being Sierra Leonean and live in London, I have so much difficulties and challenges. So think about the woman in the rural community that we work with who does not even have these types of networks. So for us and the work that we do, we also want to be that voice that can represent a lot of the challenges that's happening. So how is this fund going to help local SMEs? We've seen during COVID all the different challenges appearing within local communities. People are delaying their activities, cancelling their activities, letting staff go, some of them actually shutting down, not able to pay their rent, not able to pay their salaries. The list goes on and it's so long. But what we're now trying to do with this fund is how we recover better, how a lot of the local SMEs can start preparing, helping with their rent, helping with salaries, getting their finances and other plans that they had in place to start getting on track for next year. So I think this would be just a great opportunity. And I just think everyone should apply. As long as obviously you fit the criteria, apply, because let's not shy away from these opportunities. Sometimes on the continent, we tend to shy away because we all have there's a lot of fear around how funding works and all the inequalities around it. But I would really open up to say, when it comes out, share it. If you're not able or eligible, share it to your other community leaders and friends that's there. I think it's all around, as the Solar Sisters say, light, hope, and opportunity. And we have to take the opportunity right now to make a change.
Thank you so much, Mariama. And thank you to our panel who have all not only given us this information and context today, but have been 3 of the partners to the Council of Women Advisors to the creation of this fund, have aided in the creation of the fund. And just to be clear, today we're announcing the launch of this fund in a formal way, the SHINE COVID Recovery Fund. SHINE, the SHINE campaign, will provide flexible funding to enable a broad ecosystem of energy champions to sustain and or adapt their work, reallocate resources, and provide the support they need to survive this crisis and to respond to their community's needs. The fund will support locally based entrepreneurs and agencies and communities in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Proposals between 3,000 and 10,000 in size will be accepted. So you can see this is very small and distributed support. The fund will make grants to support the following: immediate economic relief for enterprises, community outreach and information dissemination campaigns, community-based initiatives at the nexus of health and clean energy, including solar energy systems for health clinics, treatment or treatment centers, and testing, laboratories, and solar-powered ventilators or oxygen concentrators. You can see how vital that is. Service and material provision for community-based energy access entrepreneurs, including PPE, personal protective equipment, sanitizers, and more, and provision of solar products, including solar-powered radios and phone charges for frontline rural or peri-urban healthcare workers. Really vital direct support. And so now I want to turn, with the remaining time we have, to answer questions from the chat. And Fletcher, you can see how organized we are, very organized. Fletcher, are you sending me those questions, or are you going to raise those questions in the chat?
I'm going to raise them, and I thought that it might at this stage, because there are a lot of good questions on how it's going to work. Ellen gave a great introduction. I'd like to introduce Sandra Smithy, who is SHINE's Director of Programs and Philanthropic Engagement. And Sandra, perhaps you could say a little bit more about how it works, because we know that you've taken a lot of care with the women leaders to design this in the most equitable way possible.
Yeah, that's going to be the challenge. I mean, there isn't, these are small grants, but this isn't also huge amounts of money. And so we're really looking at those locally based, locally driven, women's-led organizations that are not getting any of the resources that have been put out there. So it is much more focused on those locally driven. And so there's many of you will have seen, or there will be a link to all of you who are on here is going to, there's a link to the Shine website that has the application form, the criteria, as well as the budgeting. We're trying to make this very simple. It is not going to be so difficult, and we will take the a rolling set of proposals, and the Women's Council as well as Shine members will, Shine leadership will be engaged in deciding on these grants, and this will be a difficult, we know this is going to be difficult because not everyone can get everything. So, but it is sort of more focused. I've seen some of the questions, and it is more focused on not necessarily the immediate, but it is focused, at least in this early phase, on those companies that are really locally owned and women-led companies that are facing a crisis, as well as the communities that need additional services, particularly in healthcare, and looking at this energy health nexus, and how can these funds be made available, as well as for those communities, helping also building the demand for the companies so that there's funding that can also build some demand, more demand in the communities for particularly for some of the health services that are needed. So Ellen read out the criteria. It's pretty much on the website. We are seeing this as rolling. We're hoping to have all proposals in for the end of the year and distributing ongoing. It'll be an ongoing distribution process. So, so that we as a committee have not met to discuss the grants yet, but we have talked about as Ajayta talked about, the principles around this, and the principles really are this locally led, women-owned, community-driven kind of initiatives. Those are the criteria that we want to see met.
Excellent. Thank you, Sandra. And Fletcher, I think you're going to start posing a few questions to the panelists. We'll do that for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have a little bit of wrap up about what you can do to help support this fund.
Great. Questions for Ajayta and Mariama, and also Sheila, who's dealing with a challenging internet connection and is trying to rejoin us as we speak. Ajayta and Mariama, lots of questions about what you think needs to be done to increase access at the structural level for women-led, community-led, and owned funds. As we know, there are so many barriers. Any thoughts about what some of the priorities need to be from either from an advocacy perspective or in terms of engagement with key donors or other players in the space or in the marketplace to make sure that everybody gets access to the funding and capital they need to do their jobs?
Sure. So, I can give this in the context of how we've been looking at this, not just from Shine's perspective, but just as an ecosystem perspective, because I do think that now more than ever, there's a very strong call of action to invest in a gender lens approach in general. And I think the key here has been to be able to know who your local advocacy groups are that are kind of connecting to the larger ecosystem. So for example, and Mariama, I'll let you talk about the structure for Africa. Why don't I just take maybe Asia for my context? But, I think that, we have great umbrella organizations, including GOGLA, IFC, Clean, Ashton, and others that are really kind of pushing the advocacy, but also there are now smaller incubators that are coming in that are trying to really identify these local entrepreneurs. So Selco specifically, and I believe Sarah is on the call right now, so I'd love for Sarah to say a couple of words on this question as well. But organizations like Selco are really looking for those local entrepreneurs, and ultimately it's a matter of us just being able to make an effort to find you, but also connect with us, right, in a way that will allow us to kind of bridge that gap to be able to come together, the donors. The other point over here, and I think this is actually the purpose of Shine, and I'm just going to say this as a member, is that, it's I think what's going to be exciting is if people do take the call of action seriously and apply, because we'll finally get to build our pipeline, right, of all these amazing entrepreneurs, especially gender-led leaders. And we're hoping that you do apply so that even if, because we do have a limited pool of funding right now, hopefully that funding will come exponentially more because other donors on this call are going to get inspired by what we're trying to do. But ultimately what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to build this really strong Rolodex of local women leaders in energy access. And we can then use that to be committed to start showcasing you more, get access more, and hopefully make this into a more driven outcomes level. That would be that's kind of the goal, and that's what we're hoping to do. And as leaders in this space, we're trying our level best to kind of make that as open and transparent as possible. But Mariama, really over to you, and Sarah, I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on Selco's perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Ajita. I think a lot of the issues that especially SMEs, local companies on the continent have, is that the finance is really coming from the West. Most of the money, and so they're not really connected to these networks. And it's very, very difficult, even from our perspective, trying to find a funder, trying to get to know a donor, it's very difficult. While you can see with other companies, because they're within that circle already, they already know each other. So I think these are the roles that a lot of the local African advocacy organizations play. So for example, Access Coalition in Kenya, I think Jackie's also on the line. They're doing a lot of work around advocacy work and lobbying. I also want to put another call. We know SE for All does the Energizing Finance report on a yearly basis. I really think the next report should focus within this issue, because for me and other local entrepreneurs, we can say this all the time, and the narrative is that we're very disgruntled, we're angry, but if the data is there that shows and presents the facts, that's much more support for investors. And I think also as investors, we're here, we're open, we document any investor or any grant that we apply to, we document. And this would be another advice to local entrepreneurs. If you're going for funding, document why you're not receiving the funding. We can build cases that way. If it's about selling much more products, because that's what we get in terms of the traction, or for you to get on our portfolio, you need to have sold possibly 1,000 units, some portfolios is 5,000 units, be documenting that and look at that as a milestone that you have to work within, as difficult as it is. The other webinars I've been on, people have always asked about the role of the diaspora and what the diaspora is doing. The diaspora is huge. There's so many different organizations that's here. I've been at conferences when I've spoke about AFFORD, which is the African Development Foundation. They give out grants, they work on the continent. Linked to funding that they give from DFID and Comic Relief, they also provide capacity building and technical assistance. So with there, you're seeing the funding and the technical assistance going hand in hand. So the networks are there, but I think overall, it's just much more how you make it more equal, more inclusive for people to definitely start getting hold of the different funders that's there. And as I said at the start, African leaders have to take, they have to play a role within the space as well. So they also have to be responsible for the things that's going on the continent, looking at where the funding is going. If the African Development Bank is giving money, they should be monitoring how many locally owned organizations are doing getting the funding, where is the finance going? But I think the data, studies, actually profiling local organizations is what's going to shift. And with a launch like this and the excitement and inspiration, I think that's going to be a star as we move forward.
Great. Yeah, I wonder, there are, oh, sorry, Sarah, please go ahead.
So yeah, thanks Raja. Just really quickly, thanks Ajita and Mariama. I think just wanted to add to your points, because I think you covered a lot of the reasons, I think, for some of these structural issues. And I think very often one tends to think about, who's sitting on the table when a lot of these decisions are made. And Ajaita sort of alluded to this, investment in local incubators, local associations, and just, building that local pipeline so we actually are able to get closer to these local entities. So I think what ends up happening is that one is many degrees removed, I think, from a lot of these local organizations, and hence the lack of the visibility of them. I also think, sort of, going outside the box of how we attract a lot of these organizations. I think, I've been seeing in the comments as well, the common kind of, call that a lot of these processes can be very cumbersome and you're not able to kind of find ways to actually apply for these things. And I think we really have to challenge ourselves to think outside the box about what some of these application procedures are. And I believe that the Shine COVID fund, I think, is an attempt to do that, which is to really look at these very localized groups and to set up a process that is very practitioner driven, and sort of connects, in a very simplest and easy manner to, enable people to apply for these things. So I think those are all some of the things that are important. And I think I could not stress this more. At Selco, we've been using this line of too valuable to fail. And that's really what it is. I mean, we hear of so many bailouts.
Oh, Sarah, we've lost you. Sarah, we've lost you. Can you hear us? You were right in the middle of a key sentence. Well, why don't we pass back to Ajaita or Mariama for any final comments they'd like to make, just for a moment or two, and then I'll pass the call back to Ellen as we start to wrap up. But Ajaita and Mariama, what closing thoughts would you have?
Yeah, so just fairly quickly, I mean, I know we created this video and everyone's been very curious, but I just want to say that I'm really excited about this grant challenge, because I don't know how many of you know, but really this was created by all of us as women entrepreneurs, right? They're all women entrepreneurs that have been working in the front lines, right? Catherine Lucy has Solar Sisters, Mariama has her solar, women sales force. I have my Solar Sahelis, and, Selco's leadership coming in, and all of us came together because we're all knee deep in this problem right now. And all of us are watching our rural constituents suffer. And so when we had this opportunity to come together under Shine's roof to design something, it was really done with the lens of the local entrepreneur in mind and the local women entrepreneur in mind. And it's really exciting to see this come to action. I'm really looking forward to not just getting the applications and getting to hear about all the incredible ideas that people have that could be as simple as, I need solar lanterns for my constituents to be able to have their children study remote distantly, to a great innovation and get those ideas in, but also then build that pipeline and hopefully be able to then leverage this Shine community of incredible donors and future donors to be able to showcase all the people in that pipeline. So ideally we can then increase that fund to become even larger and greater. And this doesn't then just become a COVID relief grant, but actually becomes an equality gender relief grant for energy access frontliners for climate change and equality overall, ongoing and rolling. And that's really the vision. So it's really exciting to kick this off, but I'm going to be even more excited a year from now to see this amount triple and become even bigger. So thank you for everyone for that. And thanks so much for this opportunity.
So I will just close by saying, by just telling us a story. So there was a 9-year-old girl who grew up somewhere in Africa using kerosene lamp to study. A couple of years later, she realized that the problem was still going on. So she obviously wanted to make a change. She wanted to make a difference, and she set up her own business to do it. And she's doing that because she wants to see people have access to clean energy, for people to be able to have safe electricity. But then there's much challenges and barriers. And that young person's myself, plus many local entrepreneurs on the continent who are in the sector because they want to see a change. They want to help their communities and they want to be leaders within their community. So I'm just so excited about this fund, because I think it's definitely a way for myself and others for the applications when we're going to now be seeing, because there's going to be an opportunity to really learn and see what local organizations are doing. It's also an opportunity for us to start profiling them, for them to be at the forefront, telling their own stories, for them to be able to go to conferences, being very independent, being out there and speaking about the issues and challenges that they face on a daily basis. A Sustainable Energy Development Goal 7 is about energy access for all. So my call is, let's not leave anyone behind. Let's play an inclusive role. Let's all be equal, and let's just think about different partnerships and initiatives such as this launch that we can all bring forward to the table.
Thank you so much, Ajeda and Mariama. Thank you, Sarah, whose note we're seeing in the chat. Thank you, Sheila, in absentia. We know that Sheila's been valiantly trying to get reconnected. And before passing the microphone back to her, I would like to thank Ellen Dorsey and the Wallace Global Fund, whose $100,000 US initial grant is the seed funding for this COVID recovery fund. We are in the process of conversations with other philanthropic and faith-based funders, and we expect to have more good news to share in the coming weeks. But I want to thank Ellen and Wallace Global Fund once again for their path-breaking leadership. And Ellen, I'd like to pass back to you for a few closing thoughts on your end and for a call to action.
I'm not going to add much to all that's been said, just a couple of things. For those on this call working in this space who need funds, we urge you to apply. But for the rest on this call, we urge you to contribute. We want to scale this fund rapidly and support as many community projects and entrepreneurs as we can. Let's be clear, the more we raise, the more we give, the further we support and build this field. This is a very specific and concrete way we can have a truly meaningful impact on the intersecting and compounding crises we are witnessing and support women leaders in very specific and tangible ways. I think we're all overwhelmed by the challenges that the world faces today, and it seems difficult to have a sense of efficacy about what you can do to make a difference. This is what you can do. Whether it's a small contribution that you personally make or a very large one with an institution that you work with or are part of that has the potential to aid entrepreneurs and enable communities to be empowered and to have power to achieve health, economic, climate, and energy and equity goals. Well, I'm turning back to Fletcher to wrap this up. I sincerely want to thank our panelists, the Women's Council, not all of whom were able to speak, who designed the fund, and to all who have joined us today. I really hope you will join this amazing initiative. I feel like it's one of the most important things that I and our foundation are involved in right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Adding thanks to Ellen again, or repeating thanks to our remarkable speakers and panelists today, to the team that worked so hard behind the scenes to make this happen, Amira Woods, Sandra Smithy, the team at Scott Circle Communications. We're enormously grateful for that. And we will be responding by email to all of the registrants with responses to the questions that we didn't get a chance to answer during the call itself. I'm going to close with a couple of thoughts, a call to action, and a next step. So firstly, as a person of faith, what matters to me is that the SHINE campaign has a powerful, unequivocal values-based commitment to this field. We are committed to supporting the leaders who have the most important solutions and who are the least likely to get the support that they richly deserve and that the world desperately needs. And so that's why I'm involved. And to my brothers and sisters in the faith community, I will be, if I haven't already, I will be knocking on your doors to get you to commit to this project and to this fund and to this campaign, because it matters vitally. The second thing that I'd like to say is that soon the Shine campaign will be announcing a Shine investment facility, so that we will have funding complemented by investment for energy access enterprises that reflect Shine's values and Shine's commitments that we've discussed on this call. Stay tuned for more information about that. Finally, this is your last chance to complete the poll. Almost all of you have voted on it, but this will be your last chance. We're going to close that out momentarily. And stay tuned for information soon about a call that we'll be having next month, featuring energy access efforts in and by leaders in the faith communities around the world. Thank you again to all of our speakers. Thank you to the Wallace Global Fund for making this possible. Thank you to Shine's other funders, IKEA Foundation, Stichting Dune, the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation. We are excited to move this forward, and we look forward to being in touch. Take care, everyone, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye now.